Larry Holmes was a technical masterclass in motion, the perfect jab, incredible ring IQ, and a heavyweight who moved with the grace of a middleweight. Despite being one of boxing's longest-reigning heavyweight champions, his story outside the ring tells a different tale. Controversial losses, bitter feuds, missed historic milestones, and a legacy perpetually fighting for the respect it deserved. How did a boxer who dominated his division for nearly a decade lose the things that mattered most to him? Let's break it all down. Larry the Easton Assassin, Holmes wasn't just a great fighter, he was a pillar of consistency in an era of legendary heavyweights. A 7-year reign as champion, 20 successful title defenses, and the first man to truly follow in Muhammad Ali's footsteps. He was a technician of the highest order with perhaps the greatest jab in heavyweight history. But let's not forget, he wasn't some naturally gifted prodigy arriving with Olympic gold. He was a hard-working kid from Easton, Pennsylvania who dropped out of school in 7th grade to help feed his family. So how did this blue-collar fighter transform into one of the most effective champions ever, only to lose his shot at immortality when it mattered most? Born in Cuthbert, Georgia, Holmes was one of 12 children raised in poverty. His family moved north to Easton, Pennsylvania, searching for a better life, but the struggle continued. Working from age 13, dropping out of school to help support his family, hardship shaped his early years. That's where boxing entered the picture. Under trainers like Don Tracy and later Richie Giachetti, Holmes found his calling. But his most valuable education came as Muhammad Ali's sparring partner, learning from the greatest himself while developing the tools that would one day make him a champion in his own right. Once Holmes stepped into Ali's camp, everything changed. The rest, as they say, is history. With just 19 amateur fights under his belt, a modest record of 16-3, Holmes turned pro earlier than most elite fighters. His amateur background was nothing spectacular, no Olympic medals, no national championships, nothing suggesting the dominance to come. He was tall, fundamentally sound, but lacked the raw power that defined many heavyweights. Boxing insiders, however, noticed something special: his dedication to learning, his quick feet, and that jab that would become his signature weapon. The jab that would eventually break noses, stop opponents in their tracks, and carry him to the heavyweight championship of the world. As a professional, Holmes built his record methodically, 27 straight wins before getting his title shot. But it was his education as Ali's sparring partner that truly shaped him. Learning from the greatest, Holmes developed skills that would serve him well. Then came his shot against Ken Norton, 15 brutal rounds that saw Holmes emerge with the WBC heavyweight title in one of the greatest championship fights ever. That final round remains the stuff of legend, both men throwing everything they had, Holmes finding that extra gear champions need. Holmes didn't just win the belt, he announced his arrival as a force to be reckoned with, a fighting champion who would defend against all comers. After capturing the title, Holmes wasn't just winning, he was dominating. Defending against tough challengers like Ernie Shavers, the hardest puncher in boxing history. Holmes showed he could take a punch as well as deliver them. His jab was becoming a weapon of mass destruction, a piston that broke down opponents systematically. He was named Ring Magazine's Fighter of the Year in 1982, earning respect as the most consistent heavyweight of his era. Defending his title every few months, Holmes was the definition of an active champion in an era when champions actually fought regularly. But living in Ali's shadow proved impossible to escape. When Holmes finally faced his mentor in 1980, it was a tragic spectacle. Ali was a shell of himself, suffering from early signs of the neurological issues that would later define his life. Holmes dominated him mercilessly, yet later admitted, "I was carrying him, hitting him with just enough to keep him off me." After Ali's corner stopped the fight, Holmes was seen crying in his dressing room. He knew what he'd done to his friend and mentor. The public never fully embraced Holmes after this necessary but painful changing of the guard. He'd done what he had to do, but beating up an aged Ali won him no fans, the first major emotional loss in a career full of wins. By 1985, Holmes had amassed an incredible 48-0 record, approaching Rocky Marciano's hallowed 49-0 record. His legacy was building, not just as a great champion, but potentially as the greatest undefeated heavyweight of all time. The anticipation was building. One more win and he'd tie Marciano. 2 more and he'd stand alone in the record books. Holmes was one victory away from statistical immortality, from the kind of legacy that transcends mere championship reigns. Then came Michael Spinks, the light heavyweight champion moving up in weight. On September 21, 1985, in what many viewed as a formality before making history, the unthinkable happened. Holmes lost a controversial unanimous decision. His perfect record, gone. His dream of 49-0, shattered. This would be the fight that defined his career's turning point, not for how gloriously he won, but for what he painfully lost. And that's when things got worse. In the post-fight interview, a bitter Holmes uttered words he'd regret forever. "Rocky Marciano couldn't carry my jockstrap." The backlash was immediate and severe. Not only had Holmes lost his record, but his comments alienated fans and boxing purists alike. In one night, he lost both his undefeated record and a significant chunk of public goodwill. The rematch with Spinks in April 1986 was Holmes' chance at redemption. Many ringside observers felt Holmes clearly won this time, but once again, the judges awarded a controversial decision to Spinks, this time a split decision. These twin losses to Spinks weren't just blemishes on his record, they'd represented the loss of a historic milestone and, for a time, considerable public support. Holmes announced his retirement afterward, bitter about what he perceived as boxing politics denying him his rightful place in history. "When they stole that decision, they stole boxing's biggest record from me," Holmes would later claim. His dream of surpassing Marciano was gone forever, and with it, a certain kind of immortality that can't be recaptured. After nearly 2 years away, Holmes returned to face the fearsome Mike Tyson in 1988. Holmes, then 38, showed flashes of his old self, but was ultimately overpowered and knocked out in the 4th round, the first time he'd ever been knocked out. It was a symbolic passing of the torch to a new era. Not even this devastating defeat could keep Holmes down. The old lion had more fights left in him. He continued boxing into the 1990s, challenging Evander Holyfield for the undisputed title in 1992 and Oliver McCall for the WBC belt in 1995, going the distance but losing both. His final fight came in 2002 against Eric Butterbean-esque, winning by decision at age 52. While showcasing remarkable longevity, his later career was marked by missed opportunities to reclaim the championship glory of his prime. Unlike many fighters who lose everything, Holmes demonstrated considerable business acumen. He invested much of his earnings in his hometown of Easton, Pennsylvania, building an empire that included a restaurant, hotel, office buildings, and other commercial properties. However, not all ventures were equally successful. His ringside restaurant operated for years before eventually closing, and like any entrepreneur, he faced challenges with some investments. While he experienced financial fluctuations and setbacks with certain properties, he largely avoided the complete financial collapse that befell many of his contemporaries. His shrewd approach meant that while some individual business ventures struggled or failed, his overall financial foundation remained relatively stable, a testament to his discipline outside the ring. Unlike so many boxing champions, Holmes managed to hold on to most of his estimated $40 million in career earnings. Holmes' long and often contentious relationship with powerful promoter Don King added another layer of complexity to his career. While Holmes managed to retain more of his earnings than many fighters under King's promotion, their public disputes sometimes overshadowed his in-ring achievements. Holmes eventually broke away and even promoted himself later in his career, a rarity in boxing. However, these battles within boxing's power structure and his outspoken criticism of the promotional world may have contributed to his challenging relationship with the boxing establishment and complicated his journey to receiving full recognition. The emotional cost of never feeling fully appreciated during his prime years took a visible toll on Holmes. His bitter comments after losses, his feuds with the boxing establishment and promoters, and his frustration at being constantly compared to Ali rather than being celebrated on his own merits. These were the manifestations of a champion who felt he never got his due. While his technical mastery was undeniable and revered by purists, his systematic, methodical approach in an era between the charismatic Ali and the fearsome Tyson perhaps contributed to a different type of public engagement than those champions experience. Holmes once said, "I was better than a lot of people gave me credit for." This simple statement perhaps best captures what Holmes lost. Not primarily his money, but recognition commensurate with his achievements. With time and perspective, boxing historians have come to more fully appreciate Holmes' greatness. His left jab is universally regarded as perhaps the best in heavyweight history. His technical skills, chin, and heart are now better recognized. In retirement, Holmes has softened some of his harder edges, becoming more reflective about his career and making peace with his legacy. While he may have lost the chance at certain accolades in his prime and weathered the natural ups and downs in business, time has restored much of what was taken as new generations discover and appreciate his brilliance. Into his mid-70s now, Holmes continues being a respected figure in his beloved Easton, Pennsylvania, where his health journey has become a significant chapter in his story. Diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2013, Holmes experienced a critical episode when his blood sugar dangerously spiked to 900, transforming him into a vocal health advocate who works closely with St. Luke's University Health Network. His community involvement recently earned him special recognition from St. Luke's, which dedicated a watercolor portrait of Holmes at their Easton campus this past February. Holmes celebrated his 75th birthday in November 2024 with his wife Diane and family, remaining comfortably settled in the city he famously put on the map. While stepping back from the boxing spotlight's daily glare, he still makes notable appearances, featuring in the 2024 boxing documentary In the Company of Kings and having his story highlighted in a recent episode of PBS Ken Burns' UNUM series. Perhaps most tellingly, Holmes maintains a lasting friendship with former rival Jerry Cooney, the two champions frequently supporting each other's charitable efforts in a bond that transcends their legendary in-ring battles. A new business venture emerged recently with A-Treat, a Pennsylvania soda company, partnering with Holmes to launch Larry Holmes Cream Soda, with 20% of proceeds supporting HargoFaLegend.org, the charitable organization he founded with Diane. This move showcases Holmes' continued business savvy and philanthropic spirit, a combination that has helped him secure a legacy that extends far beyond his championship reign. His story remains one of remarkable endurance, both in managing his health challenges and cementing his place in boxing history's upper echelon. When it comes to boxing history, Holmes' place is secure, an International Boxing Hall of Famer with one of the longest championship reigns in heavyweight history. His jab remains the standard by which all others are measured, and his technical prowess was second to none. Coming after Ali and before Tyson meant Holmes often fought in shadows, but true boxing aficionados recognize his brilliance. Despite business challenges that tested him and financial fluctuations that affected some of his ventures, he managed his career earnings better than most champions of his era. He wasn't perfect inside or outside the ring, but if we're handing out respect, Larry Holmes absolutely deserves his, perhaps more than he received in his prime. Plenty of fighters have lost everything after retirement, but Holmes managed to keep most of what he earned while losing things that mattered more: respect, recognition, and boxing immortality. You've got to admit, that's a different kind of tragedy. We're sure you've got plenty to say, so drop your comments below. And if you like this video, hit that like button and subscribe because we've got plenty more boxing stories coming your way. See you in the next one.